Duff Conacher is the co-founder of Democracy Watch. He's an adjunct professor of law at the University of Ottawa. Good to see you on this, Mr. Conacher. Thank you for being my guest.
My pleasure, Heather.
So you were just saying, or you were just listening to, as I was, what the mayor was saying, calling this the sledgehammer approach, saying Doug Ford's planned invocation tomorrow of the notwithstanding clause is not what the clause was ever intended to do. Do you agree with that?
I do agree. It's really there for if there's a fundamental clash of rights and a government believes, for example, as the Quebec government did when it invoked it, to protect Francophone rights and language rights, that the measure was needed in order to shield a law that protected French language rights in the province against a charter claim by Anglophones, and really to protect what they saw as fundamental to the Quebec society. That kind of thing. In other provinces, and only a few have used them, and as you mentioned, never in Ontario has it been used by a government, but in other provinces, governments have actually backed off, even when they were looking to protect religious rights. In Alberta, a couple of times, the government proposed it and then came to its senses because of the political cost.
Well, let's talk about that. Why is it such, Matt called it a nuclear option, the danger of actually going to the step of overriding the Charter of Rights? What are the political costs? Why is it so serious?
Well, it's so serious because it's the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's the fundamental protection for citizens in Canada against governments who act in an arbitrary, undemocratic way. And for Doug Ford to say, as he did claim yesterday, I respect the courts, but I'm going to use this, he's not respecting the courts when he uses the notwithstanding clause. And he said he's protecting democracy. No, he's not protecting democracy. He's protecting his arbitrary whim to do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And democracy includes the law, and the courts are there to uphold the law, independent of government, and there to act as a check on elected politicians who are trying to abuse their powers. So Doug Ford's move, it just makes this overall whole scenario of passing the bill and trying to cut counsel in the middle of an election doubly undemocratic. Not more democratic, as he claims.
Tomorrow, he will call back MPPs and the legislature and reintroduce Bill 5, as it's known, with the notwithstanding clause included in it, and then put it to a free vote. What kind of lobbying, what kind of moves do you anticipate are going to be going on in these 24 hours to get to provincial politicians?
Well, I think that members of the Conservative Party, politicians, MPPs, will have likely already been contacting him saying, are you kidding that you're going to try to do this? First of all, Doug Ford and no one in the Conservatives mentioned that they were going to make this move on Toronto City Council after the election. So it's undemocratic to do something, and especially based on a false claim. Doug Ford has said he has a mandate to do this. You don't have a mandate if you never mentioned it to voters. They only have the support of 23% of eligible voters, and barely 40% of overall voters who cast a ballot. As well, they didn't consult anyone on this. So again, another undemocratic part of the move. And now to use the notwithstanding clause is arbitrary and undemocratic. And I would say even really, it seems like a personal vendetta. So it's really unethical. He's trying to advance some private interest or complaint that he has against Toronto City Council. I think you'll see a lot of pushback from Conservative MPPs, a lot of them not in the House to vote for this, abstaining, or some of them actually voting against it, and hopefully enough to stop it. Because Doug Ford said the other thing he's going to do, and had instructed government lawyers to file an appeal in the Court of Appeal. That's the democratic thing to do, to continue up the chain in the appeal courts and challenge the judge's ruling. The undemocratic thing to do is what Doug Ford's proposing.
And we'll hear from the city on Thursday as they prepare for whatever their next steps will be. In terms of if this stands, because if it does pass, it will stand. And if it stands, there is some concern about the floodgates opening, the precedent potential of the notwithstanding clause being used to this effect. What do you think the long-term concern here could be?
Well, it's a deep concern because Doug Ford said yesterday, again, completely contradicting his line that he respects the courts. He said, we're going to make a lot of changes in this province, and I'll be using the notwithstanding clause again if the courts try to block us. that is very deeply concerning. He clearly does not understand democracy. Democracy is not just that a politician, certainly isn't that a politician with only the support of 23% of eligible voters gets to do whatever he wants and disregard the fundamental rights of voters and all Ontarians. So yeah, we thankfully have that check on him of the courts, but his view is I'll just continue doing whatever I want and invoke the notwithstanding clause whenever I want.
Are we looking at a floodgate situation where other governments might look at this and say, oh, well, this is what's Ontario done, and if I'm thwarted in my agenda, this is what I'll do too?
I'm not sure whether we haven't seen a lot of signs that other premiers or that the Prime Minister is a Trump-like demagogue in this way. I'm sorry, that's the situation we're in now. The first step, it's very early on to be saying these kinds of things and doing these kinds of things in this mandate, and it's a real warning sign and a danger sign. We've seen what President Trump has done, a similar abuse of executive powers that continues down in the United States, and slowly the courts are checking him again and again. Unfortunately, with this notwithstanding clause, the courts won't be able to do anything to stop it. But I think the political costs will be very heavy. I would not be at all surprised to see the government back off on this. I'm sure there are a lot of Conservative MPPs saying, I didn't run on the platform of violating the Charter. I don't remember that being in our Conservative platform last spring during the election. And Doug Ford is going to have to explain to them, well, yeah, I think it's worth violating the Charter. And by the way, I'm planning to do it again. I think he's going to get a lot of pushback. If he doesn't, the political cost is going to be very heavy. And unfortunately, though, they can do it while they have this majority. But I think they're going to be hurting themselves every single time.